These trees are not driftwood, as much as they may look like it. They offer us a very good story, one that goes back thousands of years. Our beach has not always been the beach that we see today. You'd be surprised to know that these giant trees sticking out of the sand most likely once stood near where they rest today. These trees are most likely several thousand years old, much older than 1,000, but much younger than 5,000. They may be around 3,000 years old, give or take. They can be carbon dated, but we don't have that kind of money. We know the rough age of these trees only because of some research once carried out by Robert Young, Daniel Belknap, and David Sanger of the University of Maine in Orono. These lads were on a mission to find out how Johns Bay became a bay, and they offered up a wealth of great information. Within their study, they concluded that the beach has been working its way northwards over time. Over 9,000 years ago, our beautiful bay was nothing but a wider Pemaquid River. A combination of increasing sea levels due to glacial melting, as well as the land rebounding from the weight of the ice sheets going away, caused the ocean to slowly carve out the bay we know today. Around 3,000 years ago, the beach was nearly 900 feet south of where it lies today. Those rock ledges you see exposed at low tide used to be the margins at the end of the beach around then. As time wore on, the march of the tides pushed the beach further north until it arrived at its present-day location. At the very lowest tides, you are able to see quite a lot of remnants of this ancient world. The peat moss becomes exposed, as do many bits and pieces of the old drowned forest. Several stumps and entire trees still remain in the sand. Long fingers of peat moss extend outwards into the sea, and this peat continues underneath the sand for an unknown length. Peat moss forms when marshy areas are inundated with salty water. For lack of better terms, the seawater pickles the organic material in the marsh, thus forming peat moss. The peat moss also holds on to any rocks and cobble that may have been present in the marsh. You can see in this hard chunk of peat that several stones are visible. Peat moss can easily be confused for stone itself, but a close inspection will reveal pieces of organic and stony material mixed throughout. It's quite friendly stuff, though it appears to be quite gross and squishy sometimes. What is fascinating about the low tide I found at the beach this past weekend was these great lines of peat moss running the length of the beach. My explanation is that these are the ancient margins of where the sandy beach met the marshy swamp. The way that they line up, and sometimes have multiple lines one on top of another, leads me to believe that this was the terminus for the beach long ago. The trees I mentioned at the beginning of the video were part of the forest that stood behind the salty marsh, long before its pickling began. As the tide came forth, the trees' roots were soaked in salty brine. They were no longer able to survive, and fell over as the dry ground they once stood on turned to salt-filled swampland. The forest that exists behind today's salt marsh will, one day, meet the same fate. These trees are markers of an ancient lost world. What is most interesting is that the study revealed quite a lot about the Native American settlements that existed along the little streams and tributaries near the beach, known to us as the Nahanada sites, named after a native man who was captured in Pemaquid during colonial times. Native Americans may have lived in the Pemaquid region for a lot longer than we think, but because the ingress of the sea has stripped so much soil and land away over the past few thousand years, their archaeological footprint has been swallowed up for eternity. We may never know exactly how long these people lived on the coast of Maine, or even when they first arrived. People live near water, and if the water swallows up everything you leave behind, those who come after you will not even know you were there in the first place. Some of the earliest archaeology on the peninsula dates back to around 5,000 years ago, but only because that's all that remains. It could very well extend past that time. We just may never really know.